Something about this situation felt different right from the beginning. When a name like Claressa Shields enters a conversation with bold claims, people don't just scroll past it. They pause, they listen, and more importantly, they start asking questions. But what really pushed this moment into something bigger was who those claims involved. Papoose is not someone typically associated with controversy. For years, he has built a reputation centered on loyalty, consistency, and staying far away from unnecessary drama. So the moment those two names collided, the internet immediately understood one thing. This wasn't going to stay quiet for long, because this didn't feel like random gossip. It felt personal. It felt direct. And most importantly, it felt like something that could escalate very quickly. At first, the claims didn't reach everyone all at once. They started in small pockets, short clips, brief posts, quiet conversations that were easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. But that's how these situations always begin. Something gets said, a few people notice, and then suddenly it spreads. Within hours, more people began seeing it, reacting to it, and sharing it. Just like that, what started as a small moment turned into a full-blown conversation. People weren't just asking what was said anymore, they were asking why now and what does this mean. What made everything more intense was the tone behind it. The way Claressa spoke didn't feel casual. It didn't sound like a joke or something said without thought. There was emotion behind it. There was confidence. And there was a level of certainty that made people take it seriously whether they agreed or not. And when someone speaks like that publicly, it raises the stakes immediately. Because now it's not just a statement, it's a position. It invites a response. As the clips continued to circulate, reactions came in waves. Some people were shocked, saying they never expected something like this to surface publicly. Others were skeptical, questioning the timing, the context, and whether there was more to the story that hadn't been revealed. And then there were those who chose not to take sides right away. Instead, they waited. They waited to see how Papoose would respond. Because in situations like this, the first response often shapes everything that follows. And that's where the tension really started to build. For a moment, there was silence and no immediate reaction. No quick denial. No public back and forth. Just a pause. And in that pause, the internet did what it always does. It filled the space with its own narratives. People began connecting dots, bringing up past moments, and searching for clues that could explain what was happening. Some of those connections made sense. Others didn't. But at that point, logic wasn't the driving force anymore. Curiosity was. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Papoose responded. And just like that, the situation evolved from a one-sided claim into a full narrative. Because when someone like him decides to speak, especially in response to something this direct, it's not just about defending himself. It's about taking control of the story before it goes too far. What stood out about his response was how measured it felt. It didn't come across as rushed or emotional. It wasn't chaotic. It felt deliberate, like he understood exactly what was being said and exactly how he wanted to address it. The tone mattered. It wasn't overly aggressive, but it wasn't passive either. It carried a quiet confidence, the kind that suggests someone is standing firm without feeling the need to over-explain. And that kind of response does something interesting. It doesn't end the conversation, but it changes it. Now, instead of focusing only on the claims, people started comparing both sides. They began asking new questions, looking for inconsistencies, searching for details that might support one version over the other. Just like that, the situation became layered. It wasn't simple anymore. Some people believed Claressa completely, saying her confidence made her claims feel credible. Others stood with Papoose, pointing to his history and reputation as reasons to question what was being said. And then there were those in the middle, the ones who understood that situations like this are rarely as clear as they appear on the surface. But just as the conversation reached that level, another name quietly re-entered the narrative. Remy Ma. And her presence didn't just bring more attention, it brought weight. Because the moment her name became part of the discussion, everything changed. What once seemed like a situation between two individuals suddenly expanded into something much bigger. Now it involved history, loyalty, and a relationship that fans had followed and believed in for years. That shift added emotional depth to the entire situation. Remy Ma isn't just another name in the industry. She represents resilience, legacy, and a relationship story that many people admired. So naturally, when her name resurfaced, the conversation became more serious. It wasn't surface level anymore. It became personal for the audience. Fans began asking questions, quietly at first. Where does she stand in all of this? Is she aware of everything being said? Is her silence intentional? And as those questions spread, they evolved. Because in situations like this, silence doesn't stay neutral for long. It becomes something people interpret. Some saw her silence as strength, a refusal to engage in public drama. Others viewed it as strategy, a decision to observe and wait rather than react emotionally. And then there were those who believed something deeper might be happening behind the scenes. Conversations taking place privately, while the public tried to piece everything together from the outside. That's what made her presence so powerful. She didn't need to say anything. Her history alone carried enough weight to influence how people viewed the situation. Because when someone with that level of significance is connected to a story, every detail starts to feel more important. Every pause feels intentional. Every silence feels loaded. Her involvement also introduced a deeper theme into the conversation: loyalty. People weren't just analyzing actions anymore. They were analyzing relationships. What does loyalty look like in a moment like this? Who owes who a response? Should situations like this be handled publicly or privately? The discussion shifted. It became less about facts and more about values. And that's when stories like this take on a life of their own. At the same time, there's a reality that can't be ignored. The public is only seeing fragments, small clips, partial information, and reactions that may not reflect the full picture. But when someone like Remy Ma is connected to the situation, even indirectly, those fragments feel amplified. People begin connecting dots, building narratives, filling gaps with assumptions. And that's where things become complicated. Because what's unfolding online may only represent a fraction of what's actually happening. Yet, to the audience, it feels complete. That's the power of modern celebrity culture. The ability to turn incomplete information into fully formed stories. And once that happens, it becomes difficult to separate perception from reality. As time passed, the situation continued to grow. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It became a narrative. People started choosing sides more strongly. Debates intensified. Opinions became more fixed. Memes appeared. Clips were edited. Moments were taken out of context and given entirely new meanings. And in the middle of all that noise, the original situation became harder to see clearly. Because when something reaches this level, it stops being just about facts. It becomes about perception. It becomes about what people feel, what they believe, and what they choose to focus on. And in that kind of environment, the truth doesn't always move as fast as the story does. Sometimes it gets buried under layers of interpretation. But beneath all the noise, something more real is happening. The people involved are dealing with the pressure of public judgment in real time. Because once something becomes public, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. It reaches people who don't know the full story, who form opinions based on limited information. And that creates a different kind of weight. While the internet treats it like content, the individuals involved are living through it. They're dealing with reactions, comments, and constant scrutiny. And that pressure doesn't disappear when the conversation slows down. It lingers. This situation also raises bigger questions. How should personal issues be handled in the public eye? What happens when private matters become public discussions? How quickly do narratives form? And how hard is it to change them? Because once people believe something, even without full confirmation, it shapes how they view everything that follows. And that's why moments like this don't just fade away. They leave an impact. They shape perception. They create a version of events that sticks, even if the truth is more complicated. And for those involved, that can be one of the hardest parts. Not just what's being said, but how it's being understood. Because in situations like this, closure isn't always guaranteed. And maybe that's what keeps people watching. Not just the drama, not just the back and forth, but the uncertainty, the feeling that there's still more to the story. And until something changes, until something new is revealed, the conversation isn't going anywhere.